Hi, I'm Linda, and this is No Frills ASMR. I found some paperwork that one of my loved ones has that was dealing with OCD. And I thought maybe we could just look through it and read about it a little bit. I'm not a counselor or anything like that. I'm just a regular person who has some papers. But OCD is obsessive-compulsive disorder. And I know, like, a lot of people say, oh, I'm OCD. But there are different levels of that. And sometimes, if you don't know what's going on, it can be very scary. So I just thought we could just kind of look at these papers, which kind of help you if you feel like you are starting to have this problem. I think a lot of young people, when they hit, their teenage years, start to have obsessive thoughts or compulsions, like you have to put your sock on and then your shoe on one foot and then sock and shoe. And if you can't do it that way, then it's like really bad. Like not just, oh, that's how I usually do it, but no, I have to do it that way. Or you have intrusive thoughts about things, or it could be all sorts of things. But I think generally, if you're starting to have that feeling, you know it, maybe. But I know it can, if you're not sure what's going on, it can be really scary. But just know that if you have that sort of thing going on where it's like, I don't have you don't want your clothes to have a single wrinkle, so you spend time just flattening your clothes out and laying them out and hanging them, and they can't possibly have a wrinkle. And it's to the point where other people are like, what's the deal? Just put your shirt on. But you feel like you can't. Like, this doesn't feel like what everybody else feels like, so maybe something's up. That could be like obsessive compulsive. I'm not trying to diagnose anybody, but just if you start to have that feeling, you might look it up and see. And it can make you feel better to know you're not alone. And there are ways to deal with it. And these are some of the ways you can start to try to deal with it. But obviously, if it doesn't work for you, then, you might want to go talk to your doctor. Either way, you might definitely tell your doctor about it. Like I said, I don't know anything. We're just looking. All right, so they have here troubleshooting. As you begin to resist OCD, you may feel that ERP is not working. All right, what is ERP? I think exposure response prevention. That's what ERP is. Exposure and response prevention. Okay. Or that you are not habituating. If this happens, it's best to try to figure out what's going wrong as soon as possible so you don't get discouraged. All right, I don't know which sheet to read first. Now that I see this, maybe this we should read first. So this comes from an online source. And it is exposure therapy for OCD, exposure and response prevention. And I'm sure there are a lot of different ways of handling OCD. But I do know that for some people this works. Learning to gradually face your fears is one of the most effective ways to break the OCD cycle. For OCD, this technique for facing fears is called exposure and response prevention. ERP is done by exposing yourself to situations that bring on the obsessions, also known as triggers. Okay, so you're going to expose yourself to a situation. Not engaging in unhelpful coping strategies that include compulsions or rituals, and avoidance. So you might have these unhelpful coping strategies. Like, if I had a good example, but like some people have sort of, if you did something wrong and then you go back and you count these things so many times and then touch this 3 times, it like kind of helps you deal with that. It's like a compulsive thing that you have to do. So step 1, get to know your OCD better. To face your fears, it's helpful to know what you are thinking, your obsessions, and identify the triggers that bring on your obsessions and compulsions. You can do this by keeping track of the triggers on a daily basis for 1 week by using the obsessive fear monitoring form. So they have a form here, and you're going to write down your obsessive fears by how difficult they'll be to deal with, from medium to difficult to very difficult / no way. So that's the form I think they're talking about. You can do that, okay, by keeping track of the triggers on a daily basis for 1 week. And you can print this form up at www.anxietybc.com. So they have resources there, okay. Because obsessions can happen frequently, writing down 3 triggers per day, i.e., or for example, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and 1 in the evening, will be enough to give you a good overview of your obsessions and compulsions. In the column labeled Fear, rate how intense the fear was in a specific situation. So they must be using a little different than this, but you're rating it from 0 to 10. 0 is no fear, 10 is extreme fear. Finally, record all the compulsions, coping strategies you used in response to the obsession. Be sure to include both behavior and/or mental strategies you use to manage the obsession and fear. They say here's an example to help you out, but I'm not sure this is the next. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. Here's an example to help you out. What do they say? They have here. Oh, they're showing you this is how they'd set it up. Okay. So they have date, your trigger or obsession, fear from 0 to 10, compulsion or coping strategy. All right. So here's an example. On November 30th, use the grocery store pen to sign the credit card receipt. Okay, so that's something that a lot of people get kind of icky from, because there could be germs on that pen, especially at like a pharmacy. So it is not unusual to have a icky feeling from that, okay? Obsession. This pen is covered with germs from strangers. I could contract some terrible disease and pass it on to my children, causing them to be sick. Okay, so now you've gone beyond just like going, ugh, icky, I have to throw a little, wash my hands or use Perel or something. Now you're like kind of obsessing about it, going, I might get my kids sick. Having done that could lead to all sorts of bad things. Your fear level is an 8. That's pretty high. So here's your compulsion coping strategy. Scrubbing each finger carefully and washing for 3 minutes. So that's where it's kind of gone beyond, because a lot of people would have used a squeeze of Purell or just kind of gone, that was kind of icky, and gone about their life, or run to the restroom and wash their hands. But this is a little more like scrubbing each finger for 3 minutes. And sometimes what will happen is you're scrubbing your hands so often that you start to get real dry skin from the soap, or redness from the extra scrubbing. That's when it's kind of, I think most people know. They know, they can feel that they're in a different level than, somebody who doesn't have a compulsion. I'm sorry. There are a lot of trucks outside my house making noise. Hopefully it's not too distracting. Try to make an entry as soon as possible after the episode, as this will help you to be more precise. You may want to keep a small notebook with you that you can easily carry around. I wonder how many people that becomes sort of an obsession. Sorry, I'm not making light of it. I'm saying that honestly. All right, step 2. Build a fear ladder. After about 1 week of tracking your obsessions and compulsions, you will be ready to make a list of all the different situations that you fear. Build a fear ladder by rank, ordering your triggers. Okay, maybe that's where this kind of comes in. From least scary to most scary. For example, if you have contamination fears, being at a friend's apartment may be a situation that is low on the fear ladder because it only evokes a fear of 1 of 10. But using the bathroom in a shopping mall may be a situation that is very high on the ladder because it evokes 9 of 10 fear. So go to that website and you can look at their fear ladders. All right, so they give you a tip. Build a separate ladder for each of your obsessive fears. For example, you may need a separate hierarchy for all situations related to your fear of contamination. You may also need a separate ladder for all situations related to your fear of causing something terrible to happen. I think a lot of times there's this sort of, if I do this one thing, something terrible will happen to people beyond just myself. I think that's often. Step 3, climb the fear ladder. Once you have built a fear ladder, you are ready to face your fears by putting yourself in situations that bring on your obsessions, so that's the exposure, while resisting doing anything to control the obsessions and the anxiety associated with them. That's the response prevention. It's hard. Key points to manage your OCD. And they give you some more you can look up. But bottom line, start with the easiest items on the fear ladder first, so the 1 or 2 out of 10, and work your way up. Okay, so that is exposure therapy. Now, so with this list, you just list the ones that are like the lowest level. The medium really is what they started at because, there are no nothings, and then difficult, and then very difficult, no way. So you start here. Okay. Let's see. They have this, the vicious cycle of avoidance. So here is the anxiety, and here is beginning exposure and then time. And what they show is once you have the exposure, your anxiety starts to go up and go up. And so let's say, using this example, that we've used the pen at the grocery store. And then as you're walking out of the store, you start thinking about the germs on your hands and all the bad things that could happen. And you're about to get to your peak of panic and you go, I gotta run to the bathroom, and start scrubbing your fingers for the 3 minutes. And that causes the anxiety to dissipate. But the problem is you haven't fixed anything, so it can return and go right back up. It's like a circle. While if you can say, okay, I'm not gonna do anything right now. Everything's okay. I'm just gonna keep on going, and then eventually, and it's hard, that panic will start to dissipate on its own, and you'll have habituation, which is anxiety coasting. Anxiety doesn't stay with you forever, even like a panic attack. It feels terrible. It feels like it could go on, but really it does dissipate. You will get through that. And then it says, I did it. I beat OCD. This makes it look pretty simple. Of course, you have to do this with each one of the things. All right, so what does it say? Let's see. Where was that first page? Let's look at this one, troubleshooting. Some things to consider Are you doing a mental ritual to help make exposure easier? Make sure you're not saying or thinking reassuring things to yourself during the exposure. Interesting. 2, are you exchanging an old ritual for a new one? Changing the ritual can be a good way to do an exposure. But remember that the goal is to make your anxiety increase. If the change makes you feel better, it's just another ritual. Try something else. So I think they're saying in this instance, if you got to this panic peak and got to your car and thought, okay, I didn't go wash my hand for 3 minutes, but I'm going to use the Purell. And then that makes your anxiety go down, then you didn't actually make it through this. I know, it's hard. All right. Are you leaving the exposure too soon? When you choose an exposure to do, it is important to stick with it until your anxiety comes down. Sometimes this can take a long time and be tough to do, but don't give up. If you give in to the OCD too soon, it will come back stronger. Number 4, are you distracting or using coping skills? These can be helpful tools in general, but should not be used during an exposure. During an exposure, these strategies act like safety behaviors and prevent you from building your strength and handling discomfort. So, see, once you have these things written down, you are going to intentionally expose yourself. You're going to put yourself knowingly into the situation and make yourself very uncomfortable and get past it. So let's say let's say you can only I'm trying to think. Like, let's say every time you go out your front door, you have to touch the hinges on the door and then do the handle. So, but it's not as bad as, say, when you have to walk out the door with your left foot first. That is really hard. Like, if you don't walk out the door with your left foot first, you're back inside the door. So that would be like your 10 on your scale. So left foot first, out door. Now, but before you leave the house, you always touch the hinges on your door. But that one doesn't really cause you as much anxiety. And then maybe somewhere in between is like, you have to you have to make your bed every morning. But beyond that, you kind of leave the house and they go, did I make my bed? I got to go back and look. Or my bed has to be made in such a perfect way that if there's a wrinkle, I have to go back and flatten it all out and maybe even start over because the bed wasn't made the right way. So that's like, so you have rated these things on how difficult they are. So the first one you're going to expose yourself to is the easiest one. So you can prove to your brain, I can do this. So you leave your house, you don't touch the hinges, you try to open the door in a certain way, you walk out and you close the door. And you might start feeling anxiety and you just ride it. So you ride it through the worst part of it and you keep going until you've habituated. And maybe you do this a few times in a row until eventually you're not going to have this. You're just going to feel like it's no big deal. You move on to the next thing. Okay. It's tough. It's tough, but it's worth it, All right. Are you skipping ahead and doing exposures that are too hard? Yeah. So they want you to start with the easy ones and not skip to the others. If you are gradually moving up the fear ladder and communicating openly with your therapist, you should have a therapist. You can set up exposures to make sure that you will be successful and win over OCD. If you go too fast, you will be more tempted to try to neutralize the exposure, distract, or do mental rituals. Yeah, I'm not even talking too much about the mental rituals, but you should definitely have a therapist to deal with this. Are you keeping some OCD symptoms hidden? OCD can be scary and embarrassing to talk about. Hiding your worries or rituals is like giving your OCD a protective shield against ERP. Remember, you can always talk privately with your therapist about embarrassing issues and eliminate all parts of your OCD. And if you have any kind of okay, decent relationship with your family, a lot of times you think it's like something so embarrassing or so that you could never tell them. But once you tell them and they go, oh, that's no big deal, it can really relieve a lot of pressure off your mind. That like, oh, that's funny. I thought they'd react like in more shock, but it's like, no, we've all had things like that, whatever. All right. How to show OCD who's boss. Choice 1, delay. Tell OCD, I'm not going to do that right now. This is kind of interesting. I think this might be a little bit different than the other technique, but make OCD wait 10 minutes. When you make OCD wait, it often gives up and goes away. So you don't feel the urge to do the OCD thing anymore. Yeah. Okay, choice number 2, walk away. Tell OCD, I'm not listening to you. Then leave the scene. Walking away reduces the power of OCD. I'm not listening to you. Choice 3, give OCD a limit. Tell OCD, you're wasting my time. If OCD wants you to check your backpack 3 times, do it twice instead. After a few days, move from twice to once. Don't let OCD go over the limit. Yeah, I think a lot of times checking zippers on backpacks or purses, even pockets, and checking them again and checking them again. That's something that's good advice, I think. Choice 4, change the ritual. Tell OCD, you're not my boss. Do the ritual a different way every time. That feels different than what they told us here, where they said don't exchange an old ritual for a new one. So they kind of have different, and that's true a lot of times with these things. Different therapists will have different ideas on how to work with it. I would say do whatever works for you best, but just make sure if you change the ritual, you're not changing to another ritual that's just another obsessive thing. You'll know. You'll know. All right. Choice 5, do the opposite. This is a big step, but it gets you where you want to go the fastest. Talk back to OCD. Say, you're just trying to tick me off. Stop fooling my brain. If OCD wants you to avoid doorknobs, grab a doorknob and hold it. Spend time holding the doorknob every day, and soon it won't feel like a scary thing at all. Yeah, I actually think that's super effective. Do the opposite. Okay, choice 6, make it funny. Tease OCD by turning what it says into something funny. Instead of trying to run away from the OCD thoughts that are bothering you, set aside time every day to think about them on purpose, but in a funny way. And this is from a book called What to Do When Your Brain Gets Stuck from 2007 by Huebner. Okay. I'm not really pages. These pages are all out of order. Track progress. Track your anxiety level throughout the exposure exercise in order to see the gradual decline in your fear of a particular situation using the facing fears form. Feeling anxious when you try these exercises is a sign that you're on the right track. If you're not anxious, you might be too low on your ladder. And if you're feeling flooded with excessive anxiety, chances are you started too high. Remember that regardless of how intense your fear is, it will peak and then level off. What goes up must come down. Even if you do nothing about it, the fear will eventually go away on its own. Don't avoid. During exposure, try not to engage in subtle avoidance. For example, thinking about other things, talking to someone, touching the doorknob only with one finger instead of the whole hand, making mental promises to decontaminate later. Avoidance actually makes it harder to get over your fears in the long term. Don't rush. It is important to try to stay in the situation until your fear drops by at least half, from 610 to 310. Okay. Or until 6 out of 10 to 3 out of 10. Or until you notice a significant reduction from your fear at the start. Also, focus on overcoming one fear at a time. It is a good idea to do the exposure repeatedly until the first item on the hierarchy no longer causes much of a problem for you. One at a time. Engaging in response prevention. Resist the urge. In order for exposure to work, it is important that you try to resist as much as possible carrying out your compulsions during or after the exposure. The whole point of the ERP is to learn to face your fear without having compulsions. Modeling. If you have been performing compulsions for some time, it may be difficult to know how to face a feared situation without doing them. In this case, it can be helpful to ask a family member or close friend who does not have OCD to show you how to. For example, how to wash your hands quickly or leave home without rechecking appliances, and then model or copy their behavior. Delaying and reducing ritualization as an alternative. You might find it very difficult to completely resist a compulsion, especially the first time you are facing your fears. In that case, you can try to delay acting on the compulsion rather than not doing it at all. For example, after touching the floor, which is your exposure, wait for 5 minutes before washing your hands, and then wash for 1 minute instead of 3 minutes. Try to gradually prolong the delay so that you can eventually resist the compulsion altogether. It's a little tricky with these ones about germs because, of course, you don't want to not wash your hands, but you can't, and I think people who have this know, they know. They know when they can feel it when it's being more compulsive and when it's just, I gotta wash my hands because I touched something that might be icky. But it's a little tricky. All right. Re-exposure. If you do end up performing a compulsion, try to re-expose yourself to the same feared situation immediately and repeat the practice until your fear drops by half. For example, practice 1, touch the floor, and wait for 5 minutes before washing hands for 1 minute. Practice 2, touch the floor again immediately after washing your hands and wait for another 5 minutes before washing for 1 minute. Repeat this process until your anxiety drops from, say, 6 out of 10 to 3 out of 10. That's interesting. So just kind of keep doing it over and over. How to move on. Once you experience only a little anxiety when completing an exercise, you can move on to the next one. For example, after several practices, you might feel very little anxiety when you wait 5 minutes to wash your hands after touching the floor. You can then challenge yourself to wait for 8 minutes before washing your hands after touching the floor. Again, repeat this practice until your anxiety drops by half or is significantly reduced. Remember, it's okay to ask for help. Talk to a supportive person when you have the urge to perform a compulsion and are afraid that you cannot resist. Ask this person to stay with you or to go somewhere with you until the urge decreases to a manageable level. Oh, here is the website, www.anxietybc.com. This is out of Vancouver, Canada. So, just some tools you could try. But obviously, I'm not like a therapist or a expert. You should definitely talk to somebody about it. But just so you know, if you have these things, sometimes I think people don't know that it's not unusual. Like a lot of people deal with this stuff, and dealing with it as soon as possible is really the best thing to do, because they can kind of get worse if you keep allowing this cycle to happen. You might get more and more things, and it can become much worse. So you want to try to catch it as early as possible and try to get over this hoop with with a lot of your fears. And you hopefully will start to